welcome to the Heartful Parent Podcast. I'm your host, Christy Keating. In this podcast, we talk about it all, our parenting, our partnering, and our professional lives, because they are all a part of us, and we were never meant to do this alone. Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Heartful Parent Podcast. I'm really excited to share another episode with you, and this one may introduce you to something that you are not familiar with, but that ties right into our parenting. So today on the show, we have Coach Valerie Tih talking about the Enneagram. Yes, the Enneagram. And if you have never heard of that, Valerie will explain all about what it is, but essentially it is sort of a personality test, if you will. But what I appreciate about it and what we dig into in this episode is the idea that it doesn't just sort of tell you like where you are on the Enneagram or what your personality is, but it can help, when used properly, shed light on what your strengths are, what some of your challenges or blind spots might be, and give you some really practical tools for sort of busting through those blind spots. So in this podcast, we've talked a lot about positive discipline, which is a philosophy, and there's a lot of tools that positive discipline offers. And we had Caitlin Escobar on the podcast to talk about conscious parenting and sort of being aware of ourselves and how we, get in our own way in parenting. And what the Enneagram can do, as Valerie explains, is help kind of link the philosophy or the idea of conscious parenting with the tools offered by positive discipline by helping us really become more self-aware and really understand what it is about us that may be getting in the way of the way that we want to show up as parents, right? Helps us bridge the gap between conscious parenting and positive discipline and putting those together. So I find it really interesting. And Valerie is the exact right person to be talking about this. She is a coach. She owns a coaching business called JoyFULL Coaching, where she provides shame-free courses and customized coaching so that parents can become the calm and confident parents that they want to be. She also, in her coaching, works not just from a positive discipline framework, but as I said, she brings the Enneagram into it. And she has a lot of experience doing that because she is a Riso Hudson Enneagram Institute certified Enneagram coach with honors. And she's accredited through the International Enneagram Association. She is actually presenting at this year's Global IEA conference in San Francisco and presenting a talk called Parenting with Presence, Ignite Your Inner Essence Parent, where she's talking again about the tools that the Enneagram can offer. And she loves speaking, presenting, facilitating, etc. She's also a certified happiness coach, which I think is pretty fun. Valerie and her husband live in Toronto, Canada, with their 2 boys. Her youngest son has Down syndrome. And so she, in addition to this work as a coach, she really enjoys advocating for people with disabilities and is passionate about building community, spreading kindness, and choosing joy. Like I said, she's the exact right person to be talking about this new and interesting tool. So without further ado, Valerie. Welcome to the podcast, Valerie. I'm really excited to have you here to talk about something totally new for my listeners.
I'm so excited to be here and share my deepest love with them.
So I want to start from kind of a bird's eye, like broad perspective here. You and I have a lot of synergy and overlap with this idea of, positive discipline, peaceful parenting. And I would love to kind of have you start there because we often see a gap between the way that parents would like to parent and the way that they're actually showing up as parents. And I know a lot of parents feel a little bit lost because we were raised with some maybe more traditional parenting tools, those are breaking down. So maybe that's actually where we should start, is why are those breaking down? And then we can dig into like, what do we do about this gap between what we want and who we are, or how we're showing up?
Yes, we all know the gap.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest things contributing to the gap is that compliance isn't modeled to children anymore. But traditionally, like I grew up in the 70s. So, my mom was compliant to my dad was compliant to his boss. People were oppressed everywhere. So children were really seeing compliance modeled to them. So when a parent's saying, because I said so, or that kind of really authoritarian approach was much more successful because compliance was modeled, and it's just not to the same degree today. So I think those traditional ways of parenting aren't as effective. And parents who are authoritarian think their only other option is to be permissive. And maybe parents who are a bit more permissive and don't want to maybe raise their children the same way they were, think the only other option is authoritarian. And so I think parents just aren't aware necessarily that there are other options for them, including more authoritative or positive discipline types of parenting.
Yeah. And just to be really clear for parents who might not be familiar with kind of the breakdown of those styles, authoritarian parenting is, as you said, it's kind of the because I said so, my way or the highway, like lots of boundaries, lots of guidance.
Big on firm, low on kind.
Yeah. There's one way to do things. I often think of it as, everything's on a continuum, but as kind of a militaristic, style of, there is a leader, and then there are the people that follow the leader.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then permissive is kind of more of the anything goes, lots of love, lots of feelings, but maybe not so much.
Low on the firm.
Yeah.
Low on the firm, high on the kind.
Yeah. Yeah. So as you said, there's this middle ground. And, my guess is that many of my listeners are familiar with that middle ground, given previous episodes and sort of the work that I do, but we don't, we hear about it. We know it's out there. We know it exists, but doing it, balancing kind and firm is a different thing, right? Knowing about it and knowing how to do it are two different things. So we recognize that there's a gap. And, even on this podcast, we've talked about a number of different ways to kind of get into that style of parenting, that kind and firm balance. And we've talked about conscious parenting. We've talked about positive discipline and the tools that can offer, and as a positive discipline educator myself, like those tools have been life-changing for me and for my family, but
me as well.
Yeah. I mean, they're huge. And sometimes we're like, okay, I know what the tool is, but I can't do it. In the moment, the gap still exists.
I was just going to say another gap.
And so I know that what you bring into your work is this thing called the Enneagram, which for many listeners may be a totally bizarre new word. Yeah, right? What the, huh? So why don't we start with what in the heck is the Enneagram? And then we'll talk about how it applies to all of this parenting stuff.
Great. Yeah, thanks. The Enneagram, so it's spelled ENNEAGRAM, and it's Greek. Ennea means 9 and gram means something marked down. So that's where Enneagram comes from. So it's a personality typing system, and there are 9 types, but it's different than typical personality testing systems that your listeners might be familiar with. Maybe they know things like Myers-Briggs or the color system. And those things can kind of tell you, here's what you are. You're either introverted or extroverted, or, they give you different information, but it's kind of like, okay, now what do I do with that information?
Right.
I think they're helpful in that they show us we all approach the world differently. We see the world with different lenses. We have different strengths. We have different weaknesses. So I think to that degree, those typing systems are helpful. But the Enneagram offers something a little bit more unique in that it shows us some of our blind spots, what's showing up when we're not present. So when we're not present, we kind of have these habitual patterns that take over our lives, including parenting. And that could be what is creating a bit of a gap between how we want to execute positive discipline and what's actually happening. We're kind of getting in our own way, but we're not realizing it because it's blind to us. And so the Enneagram helps bring these blind spots into awareness so that we can transform them into actually our greatest parenting strengths. We can really leverage them.
Which, I mean, for anyone listening, I'm sure people are thinking, well, I would like to really be in my parenting strengths. I mean, I certainly know I would. I would like to think I'm landing there more often than not. But we all have gaps. And as you just said, we all have blind spots. So you and I talked before we started recording. And as I shared with you a number of years ago, I was working with a sort of life/business coach as I made this big decision in my own life about whether or not I wanted to leave my work in the law as a prosecutor and move into this parenting space. We all know how that turned out. I did, in fact, make that move. But one of the tools that this coach brought in was the Enneagram. So I had a little bit of familiarity with it when you and I started talking. But in the way that it was introduced to me, it was sort of like the Myers and Briggs, which is, okay, so now I've got a number. Now I know where I am on the Enneagram. What do I do with it? And I know that's important for you, is to help parents not just figure out where they land on this Enneagram, which we can talk about in a little more detail, but like actually how do we use it to highlight or figure out those blind spots and maybe make those blind spots not so blind, so that it's not a great, useful piece of information. Can you just talk about that a little bit? Like how the Enneagram can be different when administered well? Maybe that's the right question.
My person who taught me the Enneagram, he said maybe out of 10 Enneagram coaches, maybe one of them actually really know the full potential of the Enneagram. So it's really going mainstream lately, and there are a lot of people who are using it, but may not actually know that there's lots of possibility here that goes untapped. And so I want to kind of illuminate that today. So the Enneagram helps us understand whether we're present or not present, whether we're awake or asleep. And if we look at presence, can I maybe talk about it as a continuum?
Please.
Yeah. So presence, if we think of presence as a continuum, on one end of the continuum, we're very present. And presence means we're in our heart, our mind, and our body all at the same time.
Yeah.
And that helps us be very, very responsive rather than reactive. It helps us be whole and balanced in our approach to parenting rather than really polarized. But what happens is when we're a little bit less present, we start feeling something's missing, like the things that we had, all of those tools in the parenting toolbox that we have when we're present, they feel not there. So then our personality doesn't like that feeling. And so it's trying to recreate them. It's efforting it. Really, we should be relaxing back into present, but instead we think, oh my God, it's not here. And so we start trying to recreate those things that we think are missing from fear, from a place of fear. And that makes us much more reactive. You know, our heart in particular, if it doesn't have the body and the mind and we're not present, then it's like a sitting duck just waiting to react to any little thing that our kids are doing. Most of us are, on the one end of the continuum is fear and our personality running the show. Most of us are in the middle of the continuum.
Yeah.
Most human beings, most parents, we're not entirely healthy and we're not entirely just in a trance. Yes. Most of us are somewhere in the middle. But what will really bring the fear up is chaos, unpredictability, stress, feeling blindsided. Guess what parenting's all about?
unpredictability, stress, feeling blindsided, et cetera, right? Yeah.
Right. So we default into these personality patterns, but we're unconscious of them. And the Enneagram helps us be aware of them. So then we can catch ourselves in the act. So while it's happening, we can go, oh my goodness, I'm doing that thing that I do when I'm not here. Take a breath, come back into my body, come back to presence. Then I can respond better. I can really utilize the positive discipline tools.
I really, first of all, I really love the definition of presence that you shared, which is when we are in our mind, our body, and our hearts. Because, if we're all really honest about it, most of us are not walking around in a lot of presence these days, right? Like we are on a screen, we've got a calendar that is overbooked, we are, running from meeting to meeting or from kid activity to kid activity or all of the above. And it doesn't feel like there's high level of presence for many of us. And yet, like when you say that, when you feel like you're in your mind, body, and heart, I think most of us know what that feels like, at least a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And we know it feels good. We also know, or I can at
That's
least
when we're rocking the parenting moments.
Yes. We're and life in general, right? Like when we can show up in that way at work or in our partnerships or in our parenting, that is when everything feels like synergistic and like it's working.
Love-based feels good.
Yeah. Now, I will only speak for myself here. I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but I also know what it is like to settle into that fear side of the continuum.
Mm-hmm.
And to be like, oh my God, things aren't going well. And I don't know what in the world to do. Maybe you can talk a little bit more about how we can use the Enneagram specifically to get out of those moments of fear and at least back towards the middle, if not fully in to the love side of things, the presence.
Love it. So a long time ago, I heard Marianne Williamson talk about this lamp metaphor to describe presence. Now, I had traveled all around the world. I'd studied lots of wisdom traditions and all of them, whether it was, an overnight meditation or a healing with the shaman in Bali, you name it. I was like looking for the guru, the answer. We're all searching for meaning, right? So I was on a search. And they all said the same thing as be here now, be in the now. And I was like, yeah, but tell me the good stuff. But they were all like, no, be here now. And I never understood what that meant until the Enneagram. And then when Marianne Williamson talked about this lamp metaphor, she said, all of us are like lamps, every person on earth. And when we shine our lamp, we have certain unique gifts that we shine around into the world. And where we're connected and all the same is we all plug into the same source. And some people might call that source the creator or the universe or God. And if you're uncomfortable with any of those words, we can't deny that there is some type of life force that's pulsing through all of us.
Yes.
And that it makes an acorn grow into an oak tree. It helps us unfold in who we're meant to be. It helps our children become who they're meant to be in the world. So there is this life force pulsing through all of us. And we can tap into that when we're plugged in. Now, here's the part where the plug for the lamp has 3 prongs. One of those prongs is the body. One of those prongs is the heart. And one of those prongs is the head. The problem is most of us are only using 1 prong, maybe 2 at best.
Right.
We're not using all 3. So the way that we can get back to that healthy side on the continuum, back to love-based, responsive parenting, is to plug in with our heart, our body, and our mind. And I even have a little acronym for that if you want me to.
Yeah, sure. Please
get into that. I love acronyms. So the acronym is plug back in. So the P is presence. So we want to be present in our heart, body, and mind. The L is learn to relax or let ourselves relax because we think it's something we have to get to or effort towards. It's not. we walk around all constricted like a pretzel most of the time.
Yeah.
And we need to just take a breath and relax our body to open to different possibility.
Yeah.
And the U of plug is to understand ourselves, to have a self-awareness. So we've already talked about this a little bit. We know what we're doing when we're not showing up. Our Enneagram type is what shows up when we're not. And so when we can start noticing things showing up when we're not present, it's like that little beep, beep, beep in the airplane. You know, when the airplane's flying and there's a little beep, 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 and then you go back on course.
Mm-hmm.
And when we can start noticing, oh my goodness, my to-do list is long and it doesn't include anything about me, or I'm about to go postal on my kid, or any of those, right? We all have our different habits or default things that we go into when our back's up against the wall. And when we can start noticing that's what we're doing, that's that little beep, beep, beep saying, you know what, I've got to come back to presence. So that understanding ourselves, that helps. And then the G is some growth lines, which we can get into a little bit later. That's about the Enneagram symbol itself. So the Enneagram has 2 parts. It has 9 type descriptions, and it also has a symbol. And the symbol is a map. The symbol shows us exactly what we need to do to expedite our spiritual and psychological growth. It's incredible.
There's so much to dig into just with that acronym that you just shared, and I want to start with the P piece, the presence piece, because that's kind of where we started. So being present in our heart, body, and mind, as you said, like most of us are walking around with really one of those most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
My suspicion,
at best.
at best, right? We get really in our heads, many of us. And I could hear a parent asking the question, okay, I hear you telling me I need to be present in my heart and my body and my mind. How in the heck do I do that? So can we start there with like, maybe, to go back to this lamp analogy, we're like, okay, we have the plug, but the prongs are bent and we can't figure out how to get them into the source.
They're all contorted.
Right.
They're not going to fit in there at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. This is why the Enneagram's amazing, is because for each person that may look a little bit different. And so the Enneagram actually gives you information about what's going to be most useful to you and which prongs are blocked or bent or wonky. And so for everyone, it's going to look a little bit different. But I will say anybody's going to get a big bang for their buck if they get embodied and in their body, because that's really the foundation. We have to be in our body for our heart to go, oh, I'm grounded, I'm safe. And then our deeper heart can open up. A lot of people think emotionality is being heart-led. It's not. That's just our heart reacting to every little thing or being really emotional. That's not the deeper heart. The deeper heart's much more neutral. It can be sensitive to everything going on around me, but it doesn't get swept up by feelings. It's not overreactive. And it also doesn't go numb and become detached. The deeper heart's very, very sensitive, but it only can come out if it feels safe in the grounded protectiveness of the body.
Well, and when we think about parenting, I can't imagine a parent out there who's like, wouldn't enjoy that experience of not getting swept up and not being numb, right? Because neither one of those are real comfortable feelings. Okay. So Valerie, I didn't tell you that we were going to do this, but as we're surprise. Before we started recording today, you and I talked a little bit about my Enneagram, where I land on the Enneagram, because at your invitation, I took a couple of online tests and kind of got some information about what my strengths are, what number I probably am on the Enneagram. And as we're talking, I think I'm going to get a little bit vulnerable perhaps here, but I think it might be helpful for listeners to like hear what this looks like practically for somebody. Now, I want to give the caveat to everyone listening. The number that I am on the Enneagram and what Valerie will share sort of what that means, that is probably not you, because there's 8 other types.
Yeah.
But that might help us illustrate a little bit about what we're talking about and the Enneagram and when it can offer, how it can offer more presence and more awareness.
Can I put one caveat with that?
Yes.
Is actually all 9 types, when we're present, we have access to the gifts of all 9 types. And all 9 types are universal things within us. So even if your type 8, if I may, isn't someone else's type, I can definitely relate to some of the things that you're doing, because we do these things when we're not present.
Gotcha.
It might
Okay.
not just be my default, but I do it from time to time. So all 9 types are doorways back to the self.
Okay. So just to clarify, Valerie said type 8, not type A, which is a different type of personality thing. I might be that too, as we'll discover. But why don't we start, actually, maybe more from a broader sense, what are the benefits to somebody of knowing which type? Right. So I'm an 8.
Yeah.
What does that do for me? Because, we talked earlier about these other personality tests, or even the way that the Enneagram was taught to me originally, where I'm like, okay, big deal. Right. So what can that offer to me as a parent?
Yeah. And I really appreciate you being vulnerable and open about your own type, because it's really informative for everyone. So thank you for that. I know that doesn't always come easy to an 8 to be vulnerable. So appreciate her, people. One of the things that I think a lot of people don't know about the Enneagram is it is a symbol. So the symbol is a circle, and the circle represents wholeness and balance. So when we're present, we have access, as we talked about, to all those types. Now, when we do actually know our type, wow, it can really expedite our spiritual and psychological growth, because in the symbol are lines, and the lines teach us things about change, and they give us a precise map as to what 2 magic keys are going to help us. Every type has 2 lines that connect to 2 other types. And if we're able to do that plug acronym, relax our bodies, get back into our heart, body, and mind, be aware of what we do at point 8, then that opens up some possibility to bring more balance. We can start integrating rather than eradicating our behaviors by cultivating more of these other 2 types. So for you at 8 is about power, control, strength, right? That could get us into all kinds of parenting trouble.
Yep.
Especially if our children are sensitive or they have big feelings, we can feel really impatient with that.
Yeah.
But so one of the 8's lines is to point 2, which we talked about is a heart type. And that's about remembering that we can't be powerful without compassion and mercy. Those 2 go hand in hand. So that helps you not get so polarized in the bossy. It allows you to see your daughter's perspectives. It allows you to really, I love the saying, my child's not giving me a hard time, my child's having a hard time.
Oh, I love that one too.
That awakens that to empathy. Boom.
Yeah.
We can't not respond with compassion when we see our kids struggling.
Yes. And that is a phrase, the first time I heard that years ago, that really struck a chord with me, because as an 8, I was coming at it from, why is my child being such a pain in the ass?
Yeah. They're going to juvie.
Right. So remembering that, and that's something I talk with many of my private coaching clients about, which is remembering that when a child is in struggle, they are frustrated, hurting, right? I like to say, when a child acts the least lovable is when they actually need love the most. That phrase also helped me get into that place of compassion with my kids.
Yeah. And that's your growth line to 8. So it makes sense that really touched something and grew you as a parent, right? By embracing that high side of 2. And once you've been able to embrace and integrate that high side of 2, that softens those 8 patterns of wanting to control, then you get to do what's going to feel illegal. And that's the high side of the stress arrow, which we call the missing piece. It's the thing that, like, oh no, I can't do that. I'm not that.
Yeah.
But it's actually going to be our saving grace. It's going to be the big thing that softens us from being so polarized. So for 8, the line is to 5, and 5 is about taking a pause, but you're action oriented, right? So taking a pause is going to feel illegal, but it's going to help you get curious instead of furious, because you're going to start seeing the situation with a little bit more clarity, see your children's point of view, and then be able to be collaborative and problem solve with them. That is the high side of 5, moving into collaboration.
Yeah. 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 And, you and I talked about this again before we started recording, but that is definitely something that I have had to learn. And that is, I consider that it will be an ongoing learning process for the rest of my life to get into that collaborative phase and to learn to take that pause. I do that with a lot of inner talk, right?
Mm-hmm.
When my child is in a place that is frustrating to me, triggering me, I not infrequently say in my head, like, shut up, shut up. Let them have their feelings, right? Like, I mean, I really do have to kind of sometimes talk myself down internally so that I am not externally parenting in a way that I don't want to, which I think that kind of circles us back to the beginning of this discussion, which is that bridging of the gap, right?
Mm-hmm.
Between the parent that we want to be and the parent that we maybe naturally show up as.
Yes.
And I am not claiming that I get this perfect by any stretch of the imagination all the time. And I haven't necessarily been doing this in the context of the Enneagram, but I love this framework for it because it does demonstrate that there is a bridge between those two. And through sort of that self-awareness piece, which I work hard on, we can actually get that missing piece.
Yes.
At least some of the time.
Yes. And I love that you said, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. And that is what the Enneagram serves us, because at any given moment, we are asleep or awake. At any given moment, our patterns are showing up to parent, or this kind of essence parent, I like to call it, this more love-based, responsive parent is showing up any moment. Yeah. So it is ongoing. It's not a destination to get to. It's a daily practice.
On that note, I think that's a perfect sort of ending spot of thinking of this as an ongoing practice, which parenting gives us many, many, many opportunities for, right?
Over and over, every stage.
Yes. It is the most immersive and expensive personal growth course any of us could ever take, right?
They are our life coaches, 100%. If we let them.
Valerie, there's so much here. I know the Enneagram is so much more complicated than we've been able to dive into today, but I would love to let listeners know where they can find you. What's the best way to connect with you if they are interested in learning more about this tool that really can be helpful in terms of seeing those blind spots and elevating our strengths?
Yeah, I'm on all the socials, Instagram and Facebook. So I'd love for people to follow me there. And on my website, I have a free download for everyone if they want to get started in discovering what their Enneagram type is. I have a free download titled 5 Ways to Discover Your Enneagram Type and Why It Matters for Parenting. And I'd love to gift that to everyone here. And I guess you'll have the website on the show notes.
Yes, we will let everyone know exactly where to get that download from you, because I think there's a lot of people that are going to be like, oh, I'm kind of curious about this and what this might lend to my parenting. So
can I say one more thing? I know we
want to, please.
There's 2 things that block people from moving forward in finding the Enneagram. And I really would love to address that.
Please.
One is people are afraid, I don't want to be in a box. I really hope from this podcast that you see you are going to be liberated out of the box we potentially put ourselves in. You are not going to be in a box if the person's using the Enneagram tool correctly.
Right.
The second thing I will say, people are so afraid they're going to find out something bad about themselves or that it's going to be painful. You're already suffering by not being present and not by that gap of not parenting in the way that you would hope to. So pick your heart. Do you want to kind of keep showing up stuck, reactive? You don't have to go back to your childhood. And it's so great. It's humbling to see what you do and bring awareness to that. But the pain's already there. There's nothing going to be more painful than what you're already experiencing. And if anything, this self-awareness is going to liberate you. So don't wait. All the people who finally, they stalk me for like 3 years, then they come to my course and they go, I wish I'd done this sooner.
Yeah.
It's okay. You'll be safe. You'll be safe.
Well, I think if we leave space for the curiosity about it, and when we get curious about ourselves, not just our children, I always talk about it in context of being curious about our children's experience and sort of them. But when we get really curious about ourselves too, I think that's a piece of bridging that gap in the Enneagram, as you've described it today. It sounds like a fabulous tool for parents to do that. So I will make sure that all of the fabulous ways to find you, including this free PDF, are noted in the show notes, which you can get on my website. You can get to, wherever you listen to podcasts, those show notes are all there. So check it out and find Valerie. Valerie, thank you for being here and sharing this really interesting sort of window to ourselves with everyone.
I've had a great time and really feel honored to be part of what you're doing for everyone.
Thank you so much.
All right, listeners, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that my conversation with Valerie really opened you up to some new ideas or a new way that we can improve our parenting. If you would like to download her PDF, you can do that on our website, which is listed in the show notes. She also does coaching. You can do an Enneagram discovery package. I'm sharing a coupon code for that in the show notes. You can also find her on Instagram at JoyFULL, JoyFULL Coaching. And she would love it if you'd follow her. Thanks so much for being here. Don't forget that I have tons and tons of resources for you. If you are looking for them, I work with parents in all sorts of ways. And I have a fabulous membership group called the Heartful Parent Academy with tons of brand new, fabulous content, if I do say so myself, to support you on your journey as a parent. Because as you've heard me say, I don't believe that we were ever meant to do this alone. Until next week, have a good one. Take care.